Hey folks, it's Dr. Sam. I want to welcome you to another Eye Clarity podcast. We are at podcast 105, and I've got three really fabulous questions today. I'm on location. I'm on the eastern part of Santa Fe in a place called Upper Canyon Road. I'm by this beautiful stream, and it's a great autumn day. So I'm sending all that nature vibe to you as we get going. A couple of brief announcements. I have a new class that I'm going to be offering. That's going to be Saturday, October 17th at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. It'll go for an hour and 15 minutes. It's a online class on holistic vision care. And each class is very different because I send out a questionnaire to all the participants beforehand, and I create the class based on what people are interested in. So we get protocols, experiential exercises, information on how to improve your health and wellness. So if you want to sign up, you can go to my website, drsambyrne.com, and click on classes, and you can register there, or through Eventbrite and on my Facebook page. So the second announcement I want to make is that we've just upgraded our web store, and I've been getting a lot of requests from health professionals and doctors who want to offer my products to their community. And so I've set up what we call an affiliate program. And if you're interested in that, send us an email at hello@drsambyrne.com, and we'll explain it to you. And we'd love to have you on board. So check that out. All right, well, we better get to our questions. The first question is from a gentleman, Bruno, and he was asking whether caffeine has any positive effects for the eyes. Well, it just so happens there were two studies that came out, and they supported a moderate amount of coffee as a way to improve our eye health. So there is an ingredient in coffee called cholinergic acid, or better known as CLA. And researchers studied this particular compound, and they found that in moderate levels, this raw coffee actually reduce the risk of developing different retinal degenerative conditions. So we're talking about things like macular degeneration, diabetic retinopathy, hypertensive retinopathy, and even soothing things like dry eye syndrome. So Bruno, I think in small and moderate amounts, if you want to drink a little coffee every day, it probably does have some positive benefits to your eyes. So I want to thank you for the question. All right, let's go to question 2. And Gayle is asking about the difference between probiotics and prebiotic fiber, and what are these all about? So in our intestinal chamber, our gut, we have what we call the healthy bacteria. And another term for this is the microbiome. This is the healthy bacteria that live in our body. And the prebiotic fiber, they are the foods that the good bacteria feed on. So in prebiotic fiber, these are sourced from carbohydrates. We can't digest them, but there's certain foods that are prebiotic fiber, things like Jerusalem artichokes, asparagus, onions, garlic, oats. So these would be the prebiotic fiber that you would eat. And then the probiotics, the sources of those would be fermented foods, things like kimchi, kefir, kombucha, sauerkraut. So the combination is really, really symbiotic in getting your microbiome to be healthy. And when we have a healthy microbiome and there's this symbiotic relationship going on, protects us against toxicities, viruses, the not so healthy bacteria. And there is definitely a correlation between our gut health and our eye health. The eyes have one of the highest concentrations of blood vessels in the entire body. And if we have an inflammatory disease in our intestinal health, eventually it's going to spread into the eyes, and it leads to things like oxidative stress and free radical damage, some of the conditions that you're dealing with, like cataracts, macular degeneration, glaucoma, dry eye, computer vision syndrome, and so on. Things like stress and trauma, toxicity, all of these things can reduce the probiotics and the prebiotic fiber, as we know. And it's important that we address this particular issue, and I would do so through a functional medicine doctor's office, because a lot of questions I get about, well, what supplement should I take for probiotics? And I don't really know, because we need different bacteria strains, different amounts of colony family units of the good probiotics. And this is where getting a blood test, getting some biochemistry analysis to find out, what your microbiome is like, what you're deficient in, what your diet is doing, your stress is doing. All of these things can deplete both the probiotics and the food that the bacteria need to be healthy. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And it's a really great question. So thanks, Gayle. I appreciate it. All right, our last question today is from Bob. And he is in the midst of getting injections for his wet macular degeneration. And he's being given the drug Avastin. And he wants to know if there are any alternatives to the injections. He really doesn't like them. So wet macular degeneration is a condition where the macula of the eye actually develops abnormal blood vessels that grow behind it. Now, the macula is the part of the retina where we see detail, where we have color vision, and it's a vulnerable area because it relies on its nutrient absorption indirectly. There are no blood vessels that run through the macula. So if there's an imbalance in the retinal circulation, this leads to oxidative stress. And there are two kinds of macular degeneration. There's the dry kind and the wet kind. Now, the wet kind means that these abnormal blood vessels or edema may be growing behind the macula, and it creates a puddle that could lead to swelling. But the bottom line is there's a distortion in a person's visual acuity and attention to detail. So the standard operating procedure is to get these injections as a way to reduce what we call the VEGF. And this particular VEGF can wreak havoc on our retinal cells. And the Avastin is there to see if we can reduce the growth of the abnormal blood vessels. It's a tough go because really these drugs do nothing more than treat symptoms. There's lots of side effects. And on the short term, they might help. But in the bigger picture, in the long term, in the macro, there's so many things that you could be doing to see if you could move away from the injections and reduce the abnormal blood vessel growth. So number one, the first thing would be to eat a diet that is anti-inflammatory. Inflammation seems to feed on this condition. Number two, I would reduce or eliminate sugars. If your blood glucose levels are moderate to high and you have a higher risk of developing diabetes, you're going to have a higher risk of developing wet macular degeneration. Number three, if you've been exposed to heavy metal toxicities and you can detox those out of the body. That could be very helpful as well. Number 4, if you've been exposed to mold any time in your life, you could have mold inside of you, and this could also be one of the causative factors of the macular edema or the fluid behind the macula. Dairy products. I find that when I take people off dairy products, their wet AMD seems to reduce, so that's another thing that you could do. I would consider getting some regular acupuncture if you can open the meridians from the organs to the eyes, especially the liver, the gallbladder, because those innervate the macula and the retina. That could also be beneficial. My eye exercises are also really helpful in creating new pathways in order to be able to see, and the plasticity potential that exists in our eyes is infinite. And if we start doing these exercises, we can change a lot of the patterns that have created the structural deficits. Make sure you wear blue blockers if you're using any kind of screen time, and amp up your carotenoids. Lutein, 20 milligrams a day. Zeaxanthin, 6 milligrams a day. And astaxanthin, 12 milligrams a day. I would consider an overall eye nutrient vitamin that has things like taurine and ginkgo. I would also add things like bilberry, quercetin, obviously your beta-carotene, your trace minerals, glutathione. All of these things can be really helpful for your eye health. And last but not least, color therapy can be very soothing and helpful for the retina and the photoreceptors. So this would be another technique that you could get into. So there's lots of things that you can do to treat the causes of wet AMD. And I've had a number of patients move away from needing the injections because their eyes have healed. And Bob, you could be one of those people. So thanks so much for the question. Well, everybody, I think that's a wrap. I'm going to call it a day. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And if you've got questions, feel free to send them to me, hello@drsambyrne.com, and I'll be happy to answer them. Until next time, take good care.